In the last lecture, we discussed angular momentum. We learnt that if there is no external torque acting on the system, then angular momentum remains constant. That is the law of conservation of angular momentum, and this law is very important in the whole of physics. We also learned about moment of inertia, and we saw that it plays the same role in rotational motion which mass does in linear motion. Today, we intend to discuss gravitation. As you know, gravitation was discovered by the great scientist Sir Isaac Newton. Newton discovered that each particle in this universe attracts every other particle, and the force, the magnitude of the force between these particles is proportional to the product their masses and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them. Suppose we have mass m1 and mass m2 placed at a distance r. Then the force between them can be written as m1 into m2 by r squared multiplied by a constant g. G is known as the constant of proportionality. Actually, G is the universal constant of gravitation. Why is it universal? It is universal because wherever you go, this constant has the same value. That means, the force between two particles remains the same whether we are on the earth or we are on some other planet or we are on some other star. That is why it is called the universal constant of gravitation. Its value is 6.63 into 10 to the power minus 11 Newton meter square by kilogram square. As you can see, the value of G is extremely small. That means that the force of gravitation is quite weak. Since the value of G is very small, it could not be determined in the time of Newton. About 100 years later, it was determined by Cavendish using a very sensitive instrument called torsion balance. Torsion balance consists of two small balls mounted on a light beam suspended by a material which is sensitive to torsional deflection. This arrangement is known as a torsion balance. It is used for very sensitive measurements. Two large balls are mounted on a stand which can be rotated on its axis. So, let us see what this torsion balance looks like. Here is a beam which is very light. There are 2 point masses or very small spheres at the two ends of this beam, and this is suspended by thread or some other material which, when the beam rotates, which will bring about a restoring couple, so that the beam gets deflected by a certain angle. Let us see how it works. You see, two large balls are mounted on a circular track. These large balls are placed on either side of these small masses, and they exert forces F on each other. These forces are equal and opposite, and they constitute a couple. After this, large masses are rotated and they are brought in the vicinity of these masses on the other side, so that the beam gets deflected on the other side. There are several such observations, and the mean of those observations is taken as the deflection of the beam. Now, the large balls placed near the small balls exert gravitational forces on them. We have seen that. These forces are equal and opposite, as I have told you. They form a couple which tends to rotate the beam. Because of the deflection in the beam, the suspension undergoes rotation, which produces a restoring couple in the suspension. Again, let us look at this. This is beam, and these are the position of the masses. The distance between the large mass and the small mass is r, and the length of the beam is L. It is suspended by a fiber or by some thread, and you can see that when the balls are in this position, the beam is deflected in this direction. When the balls are in opposite position, then the beam is reflected in the other way, and the mean of these two and several such observations actually is taken. The gravitational force, as we have seen, has magnitude F equal to g times small m times capital M by r squared, and the length of the beam is L. Therefore, the couple called tau is F times L. If C denotes the restoring couple per unit angle of suspension, then equilibrium is reached when the beam has deflected through an angle theta. We write this equation: C theta is equal to L g times small m capital M by r squared. From this we can get g, which is equal to r squared C theta divided by L, which is the length of the beam, m, which is the mass of the small sphere, and capital M, which is the mass of the big sphere. All these things are known. Therefore, g can be determined. Since the deflection is small, we usually use light beam arrangement to determine this deflection. Interestingly, Cavendish did not do this experiment to determine the value of capital G. His aim was to determine the weight of the earth. That is why this experiment is sometimes known as weighing the earth. You see, from this equation m g equal to this, if the radius of the earth is known, one can calculate the mass of the earth. You see, everything else is known, m g is known, capital G is known now, small m is known, capital R, the radius of the earth is known, and therefore, the mass of the earth can be determined. How is the radius of the earth known? Let us look at this experiment, which was done long back by a Greek scientist, Eratosthenes. You see, on the day of summer solstice, at the place he worked, this place is called Cyane, the rays of the sun are vertically downwards, and at the same time at another place, Alexandria, these rays appear at an angle to a tall object. I will show you here. Look at this. This is the tall object. These are the rays of the sun, and here they are vertical, and here they appear at an angle to the tall object. We can see from the shadow formed by the tall object, and this angle is alpha, which is equal to 7.2 degrees. Now, this angle alpha is known, and distance between Cyane and Alexandria is known. Therefore, we can find out the r, the radius of the earth. The experiment is very simple. In fact, you can also try to do this in a very simple manner. Here again I will show you the apparatus used, or the process that was used. These are the sun rays. At Cyane, they are overhead, come vertically downwards. At Alexandria, they are at an angle of alpha, which is the same as this angle alpha, and so we know alpha, we know the distance between these two places, and therefore, we can determine the radius of the earth. You will be surprised to know that 2000 years or more back, this radius was determined with quite accuracy. The magnitude of the gravitational force between two particles of mass m1 and m2 is g times m1 m2 by r squared. This is the magnitude of the force, but we all know that force is a vector quantity. Therefore, we must express the law of gravitation in its proper form, in its vector form. So, let us again take these two masses m1 m2, the distance between them is r, and r cap is a unit vector in the direction of r. So, when m1 attracts m2, that is the force on m2 due to m1, which we call F21, this force is equal to, the magnitude is equal to g times m1 m2 by r squared, and the direction you can see, since the force attracts m2, the direction is opposite to the unit vector r. So, therefore, we put a minus sign and a unit vector r here. So, this gives us the complete picture of the law of gravitation. You can see, I will show you again. Now, we consider the force acting on m1 by m2. This force attracts m1 towards m2. Therefore, this force is in the direction of this red arrow, is in the direction of the unit vector. Therefore, we can write the force F1 F2, that is the force acting on m1 by m2, which is equal to g times m1 m2 by r squared into r cap. You see, there is no negative sign, because now the red arrow, you can see that, points in the same direction as the unit vector. Now, since r cap is r vector by the magnitude of r, we can write F21 and F12 again in this form, but the important thing to remember is that F21 is equal and opposite to F12 as required by the third law of Newton. We can also write these forces in terms of the vector positions of masses m1 and m2. The vector position of m1 is r1, the vector position of m2 is r2, and m1 m2, this vector is vector r1 minus vector r2, and using the same notation we can write f12 equal to g times m1 m2 by r1 minus r2 cube, the cube of their positive value, into r1 minus r2, and f21 as minus g times m1 m2 by r1 minus r2 cube into r1 minus r2. Remember that the again f1 f2, they are equal and opposite, and dimensionally you can see this is a vector and has magnitude r. This is r cubed in the denominator. Therefore, what is left in the denominator is r squared. So, therefore, dimensionally these equations are correct. We are now in a position to answer the oft asked question. You must have been asked this question many times. If the earth attracts the apple, does the apple also attract the earth? The answer is yes. Why don't we see the attraction of the apple, attraction of the earth by the apple? Let us answer this question. The reason why we do not see any effect on the earth of the force exerted by the apple is that earth is an enormously bigger and more massive object than the apple. So, the poor apple is very small, the earth attracts it, it shows. The earth is huge, and the attraction of the apple is very little, and therefore, it does not show. You can see acceleration of the apple is f by the mass of the apple, which is much larger than the acceleration of the earth under the same force f, and the mass of the earth is m earth. Because m earth is much larger than m apple, the acceleration of apple is much larger than the acceleration felt by the earth. Again, the gravitational force between the two given particles is along the line joining them. You see, if m1, m2 are the particles, then the force is along this line joining them, and its magnitude depends only on the magnitude of the distance between them, which is r. A force which satisfies these criteria is called a central force. What are these criteria? One, that the force should be along the line joining the two particles, and it should depend only on the distance between them. And you can see that here, this mass m attracts m1, m2, m3, and you can see that the forces are along the line joining them, and their magnitude is also dependent only on the distance r. The upshot of this is that gravitational force is a conservative force, which implies that the work done by this force when a mass particle is taken from one point to another does not depend upon the path taken by it. It depends only on the end points. I have shown you three paths. Whether you take B to A by this path, or A to B by this path, or by this path, or by this path, the work done is the same. It does not depend upon the path, it depends only on the positions A and B. Gravitational force obeys the principle of superposition, that is, if a particle experiences several gravitational forces, then the net force is the vector sum of all these forces. You can see this, which I have done here, that the force m1 and m2 is this force, this is this force, and therefore, its resultant is this. The resultant of this and the force m3 is this green line, and this, when we compound them, the resultant is this line. So, the net force is always the sum of the vector positions, the vector forces. Gravitational is one of the 4 fundamental forces of nature. The other 3 are electromagnetic force, strong nuclear force, weak nuclear force, and we shall study them one by one when the time comes. Gravitational force is a long range force, that is, it varies as 1 by r squared, therefore, it varies very slowly. The result is that even at large distances, the force is still present, and this is shown here. The solar system is huge in size, yet the sun is able to exert gravitational force on the planets going around it. Galaxies are extremely far off from each other, yet the gravitational force is sufficient to cause interaction between them. I have shown you here the galaxies which are colliding due to the gravitational force. The gravitational force of the earth is generally called gravity. Of course, this word is no longer used in the sense it was meant. And when we consider the force due to earth, you remember the center of mass, we go to the center of mass of the earth, which is the center of the earth. Therefore, all distances are measured from the center of the earth. This is the radius, and this is the distance r, small r, to this point m, and the force is g mm by r squared. And what is the importance? That we can get rid of the earth if we place the mass of the earth at its center of mass. The effect is the same. We do not require the earth. All that we require is that its mass should be placed at the center of its mass, and therefore, the rest follows. It must be measured from its center of mass, which is at its center. In the next one, we will continue with gravitation. We shall see the acceleration due to gravity, what this implies, and how it varies from point to point on the earth, inside the earth, outside the earth. We should also look at the things like the weight of a body and the right way to express this weight.